You will never be my husband!
You think money can love you back? The man's voice echoed in her head, sharp as glass. Celeste Hartley blinked away the memory and stared at the city stretched beneath her penthouse window. The skyline glittered like a crown she no longer wanted to wear. It was 6 a.m. and she was already dressed for battle. Black suit, sharper heels, eyes that didn't blink long enough to feel. The world called her a genius, billionaire, youngest CEO in Manhattan. But behind the headlines was a woman built entirely from armor and silence. Every morning she repeated the same ritual: coffee, contracts, and control. Emotions were weaknesses, feelings were debts. She'd learned that from the man who raised her like a soldier, not a daughter. She didn't believe in kindness anymore. Love was for those who could afford to lose. Her phone buzzed. Another meeting. Another deal. But when her assistant mentioned a community consultant named Noah Blake joining the board session, Celeste's brow lifted. A consultant? In her empire? She smiled coldly, unaware that the stranger walking into her boardroom that morning would shatter everything she thought she knew about power. Your company feeds the poor just long enough to take their land back. The words sliced through the boardroom like a blade. Every executive froze. Celeste Hartley lifted her eyes from the report, her expression unreadable. Across the table stood Noah Blake, calm, steady, completely out of place in his worn grey suit. He wasn't intimidated by her silence. In fact, he looked like he'd been waiting for it. "Excuse me?" she said quietly. "You heard me," he replied. "You call it charity. I call it a photo shoot with better lighting." A low gasp swept across the room. No one spoke to Celeste that way. But Noah didn't stop. He reached into his bag and placed a child's crayon drawing in front of her. A stick figure bossy, holding a broken kite. "His name's Isaiah," he said. "He wants to be a pilot. He can't even afford notebooks. Your foundation could change that, if you actually cared." The silence was thunderous. Celeste's fingers tightened around her pen, yet her voice stayed calm. "You're very bold, Mr. Blake. Or maybe everyone else here's too afraid to tell you the truth." She should have fired him. Instead, she smiled faintly. "You just earned another meeting." "Why do you look at me like that?" Celeste snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. Noah didn't flinch. "Because you're pretending to be made of steel when you're just tired." The room fell silent. She hated how easily he read her, how calmly he spoke truths no one dared to say. For weeks, they'd been forced to work side by side, reviewing projects, rewriting reports, arguing over every detail. She lived in logic, he lived in heart. Every conversation felt like a battlefield. "You think compassion runs a company?" she challenged. "No," he said, "but without it, a company forgets why it exists." His words burned deeper than any insult. He didn't look at her with fear. He looked at her with understanding. It unsettled her more than defiance ever could. That night, long after the meeting ended, Celeste stood alone in her office. Rain streaked down the glass walls, blurring the city lights. She thought of his voice, his quiet confidence, his refusal to bow. For the first time in years, she wondered what it would feel like to be seen, not as a billionaire, not as a headline, but as a woman. And that thought scared her more than failure ever had. "Don't fall in love with me, Noah." Her voice cracked as she said it, eyes fixed on the city instead of him. "I already did," he answered, soft but certain. Celeste froze. For a woman who controlled everything, markets, mergers, even people's loyalty, this was that. The one thing she couldn't manage. Love was chaos, and chaos scared her. They'd grown closer without meaning to. He made her laugh at street food stalls instead of luxury dinners. He took her hand when she wasn't wearing confidence like a mask. And every time he looked at her, she felt both powerful and fragile at once. But happiness made her uneasy. It exposed her fears, the whispers from her board, the judgment in the press, the haunting voice of her father reminding her, weakness destroys legacies. One night, she caught Noah watching her with that same steady gaze. "You think I can change you?" he asked. "No," she said quietly. "I think you already have." Outside, cameras flashed. Inside, their worlds collided. Celeste didn't know yet that love would soon become her biggest risk, and the very weapon others would use to destroy her. "Tell me it isn't true, Noah." Her voice shook, a mix of fury and disbelief. Papers were scattered across the glass table, confidential files, emails, and security reports, all pointing to him. Noah stood still, jaw tight. "What exactly am I supposed to have done now?" She threw a folder at him. "Corporate leaks, investor data, every trace leads to your access code." The room went cold. For a long moment, neither spoke. The man she once trusted with her heart now looked like a stranger. "You think I'd betray you for money?" he said quietly. "I don't know what to think anymore." "Then think about who gave you that evidence," he snapped. "Who benefits from breaking us apart?" His anger made her flinch. For the first time, she saw pain in his eyes instead of patience. But fear whispered louder than logic. Fear of humiliation, fear of being fooled, fear of losing control. She straightened, voice like ice. "You'll never be my husband, Noah. You've already proven what you are." He didn't argue, just looked at her, one last time, with heartbreak that words couldn't hold. Then he walked out, leaving silence in his place, and a wound she would carry far longer than she realized. The rain hit his windshield so he heard it sounded like applause for his defeat. Noah drove through the night, her words still echoing. "You'll never be my husband." He hadn't fought back. What was the point? The woman he loved no longer saw him, only the ghost her fear had created. At a red light, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the ultrasound photo, the secret he never got to share. He'd planned to tell Celeste that night she was pregnant. Now it was a truth buried beneath betrayal. Days turned into weeks. He left the city, changed his number, and disappeared into a quiet town where no one knew his name. Months later, 2 cries filled a small hospital room. Twin boys, Luca and Kalen, tiny, perfect, and innocent of their parents' mistakes. Noah raised them alone, whispering stories of a strong woman who once built empires but forgot how to love herself. He never spoke her name, but every time his son smiled, he saw her eyes and felt both heartbreak and hope in the same breath. "Ma'am, you need to see this." Her assistant's trembling voice broke the silence. Celeste looked up from her desk as a folder slid across the table, the headline screaming in bold, "CFO Damien Cole arrested for fraud and espionage." Her heart stopped. Each page she turned twisted the knife deeper, forged access logs, falsified emails, every proof that had destroyed Noah, created by Damien. Her hands shook. The air left her lungs. "Oh God," she whispered, "he was innocent." The room around her blurred. Her empire, her power, her pride, all suddenly meaningless. She remembered Noah's voice that night, calm and broken. Who benefits from breaking us apart? And now she knew. She had built a fortress of success and turned it into a prison of guilt. Reporters called her brilliant again when she fired Damien and restored her company's image, but none of it mattered. Late at night, Celeste stood before the same window she once ruled from, staring at her reflection. "He told me I'd regret it," she whispered, and he was right. For the first time in her life, the woman who conquered everything finally felt what it meant to lose something real. The world forgot Noah Blake, but Celeste never did. 2 years passed, yet his absence echoed louder than any success she rebuilt. She sold her penthouse, resigned from her company, and used her fortune to build schools, hospitals, and shelters. To the public, it looked like redemption. To her, it was punishment. Every morning she woke with the same ache, the sound of his voice, the weight of the words she couldn't take back. Her life was quieter now. No parties, no headlines, just purpose and silence. Still, she searched for him, through charity networks, project reports, even small-town outreach lists. But Noah Blake had vanished like a ghost who refused to be found. Then, one afternoon, while visiting a community park her foundation had rebuilt, she heard laughter, high, bright, and achingly familiar. 2 little boys were chasing each other across the grass, sunlight tangled in their hair. Celeste smiled at the innocence of it, until she saw the man pushing them on the swings. Her smile faded, her breath caught. It was him. Noah Blake. And the 2 boys who called him Dad had her eyes. Noah? The word slipped from her lips before she could stop it. He turned slowly, the sound of her voice freezing the moment. Time seemed to fold in on itself. 2 years of silence collapsing into one heartbeat. The laughter of the children faded. The world went still. He looked different now. Older, steadier, dressed simply, but with a calm she'd never given him. And then her eyes fell on the boys. Their faces were unmistakable, her grey eyes, his quiet smile. "Daddy, who's that lady?" one of them asked. "Just someone Daddy used to know," Noah replied softly. The words hit harder than any insult ever could. Celeste took a trembling step forward. "They're mine, aren't they?" Noah's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, but the truth was written in the way he looked at them, in the way they looked back at him. "Please," she whispered, "I never knew." "You never wanted to," he said. "You believed everyone but me." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to hold them, to explain, to fix everything, but it was too late. Noah took his son's hands and turned away. And this time, Celeste didn't stop him. The pen trembled in her hand as she wrote his name. Noah Blake. It had been 2 years since she'd said it aloud, yet it still felt like a confession. The letter began simply, but every word carried the weight of a lifetime. Noah, I built towers to feel safe and ended up trapped inside them. You gave me truth, and I called it betrayal. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only ask that you tell our sons their mother finally learned how to love, not with pride, but with peace. Tears stained the paper before the ink dried. She folded the letter carefully, sealing it with the same trembling hands that once pushed him away. Weeks passed. No reply came. Then one morning her assistant walked in holding an envelope. No return address, just a simple note inside. For the children who still believe in hope. NB. Along with it was a check large enough to rebuild 3 schools. Celeste smiled through her tears. He hadn't forgiven her, but he had understood her. "Miss Hartley, they're ready for you," the teacher called from the doorway. Celeste looked up from the classroom window, sunlight spilling across her desk. The sound of children laughing outside filled the room, a sound that once reminded her of everything she'd lost, but now it reminded her of everything she'd rebuilt. She no longer owned towers or empires. Instead, she owned peace, the kind that came from giving, not taking. She'd turned her fortune into a foundation that changed lives quietly, without cameras or applause. Some afternoons, she'd see Noah from afar, walking with their 2 sons along the old park road. The boys were growing fast, full of the light she once tried to hide from. Noah would glance her way, offer a small nod, then keep walking. No anger, no words, just quiet understanding. She'd smile faintly, whispering to herself, "He gave me pain once, now he gives me peace." And for the first time, Celeste Hartley understood. Real redemption doesn't erase the past. It teaches you how to live with it, gracefully. The storm rolled in quietly that evening, rain sliding down the classroom windows like tears. Celeste stood alone by the glass, watching the children she'd taught all year running through puddles, laughing without fear. Their joy was something she once couldn't understand. Now it was all she wanted to protect. She thought about the woman she used to be, powerful, untouchable, admired by millions, but loved by none. And then she thought of Noah, of the pain she caused, of the boys who carried both their hearts. A smile tugged at her lips as she whispered, "Real wealth isn't built in towers. It's built in hearts." Thunder echoed softly, almost like an answer. Celeste turned off the lights, leaving the classroom in warm twilight. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from her past. She was walking toward her peace. Because some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with understanding. True success isn't measured by power, status, or wealth. It's measured by compassion, forgiveness, and the courage to love even after losing everything. Sometimes, life takes everything from us not to punish us, but to teach us what truly matters.